Rife Resources Limited, Contractor and Visitor Safety Orientation. Environment, Health and Safety Policy. Rife Resources is committed to ensuring the health and safety of employees, contractors, visitors, and the public, as well as the protection of the environment. This policy applies to all employees and contractors and to the directors and officers of Rife, which is 100% owned by the CN Pension Trust funds. Employees at all levels, workers, supervisors, and managers, as well as contractors, are required to comply with the Environment, Health and Safety Program by, including safety and environmental considerations in the purchase of properties, goods, and services, complying with government acts, codes, and regulations, operating consistent with industry codes, practices, and guidelines, effectively communicating hazards to employees and contractors and ensuring a safe work environment, ensuring prompt and effective response and follow-up to hazards, emergency situations, and incidents, providing required training to employees and contractors to ensure their competence and compliance to EHS requirements, provide required equipment to ensure work is conducted in a safe and environmentally responsible manner, promoting the aspect of careful planning and good judgment, the implementation of company procedures, and monitoring of company activities, communicating openly with members of the public regarding our activities, continuously monitoring and amending the company's policies and procedures as required. Supervisors are responsible to monitor and ensure compliance, mentor, and train workers. Managers will monitor and reinforce work performance related to these requirements and ensure workers are provided with necessary training and resources. The company's overall goal is to conduct its operations in a manner that will minimize both adverse environmental effects and consequences of loss. Rife's management believes that all employees have a vital role in achieving excellence in environmental health and safety performance. This is best achieved through careful planning and the support and active participation of everyone involved. Life-saving rules. Rife has endorsed the Energy Safety Canada Life-Saving Rules. Had Energy Safety Canada's life-saving rules been implemented and followed in every case, more than an estimated 80% of those deaths in the oil and gas industry could have been prevented over the past 15 years. Take a moment and review each of these rules. Confined space. Obtain authorization before entering a confined space. I confirm energy sources are isolated. I confirm the atmosphere has been tested and is monitored. I check and use my breathing apparatus when required. I confirm there is an attendant standing by. I confirm a rescue plan is in place. I obtain authorization to enter. Working at height. Protect yourself against a fall when working at height. I inspect my fall protection equipment before use. I secure tools and work materials to prevent dropped objects. I tie off 100% to approved anchor points while outside a protected area. Work authorization. Work with a valid permit when required. I have confirmed if a permit is required. I am authorized to perform the work. I understand the permit. I have confirmed that hazards are controlled and it is safe to start. I stop and reassess if conditions change. Energy isolation. Verify isolation and zero energy before work begins. I have identified all energy sources. I confirm that hazardous energy sources have been isolated, locked, and tagged. I have checked there is zero energy and tested for residual or stored energy. Line of fire. Keep yourself and others out of the line of fire. I position myself to avoid moving objects, vehicles, pressure releases, and dropped objects. I establish and obey barriers in exclusion zones. I take action to secure loose objects and report potential dropped objects. Life-saving rules. Bypass safety controls. Obtain authorization before overriding or disabling safety controls. I understand and use safety-critical equipment and procedures which apply to my task. I obtain authorization before disabling or overriding safety equipment, deviating from procedures, crossing a barrier. Driving. Follow safe driving rules. I always wear a seatbelt. I do not exceed the speed limit and reduce my speed for road conditions. I do not use phones or operating devices while driving. I am fit, rested, and fully alert while driving. I follow journey management requirements. Hot work. Control flammables and ignition sources. I identify and control ignition sources. Before starting any hot work, I confirm flammable material has been removed or isolated. I obtain authorization. Before starting hot work in a hazardous area, I confirm a gas test has been completed. Gas will be monitored continually. Safe mechanical lifting. Plan lifting operations and control the area. I confirm that the equipment and load have been inspected and are fit for purpose. I only operate equipment that I am qualified to use. I establish and obey barriers and exclusion zones. I never walk under a suspended load. Fit for duty. Be in a state to perform work safely. I will be physically and mentally in a state to perform my assigned duty. I commit to not being under the influence of alcohol or drugs. I will inform a supervisor immediately if I or a coworker may be unfit for work. Safety responsibilities. Workers, contractors, and visitors are responsible to protect the health and safety of themselves and other personnel on the worksite. Properly use and maintain personal protective equipment. Abide by all government regulations and company policies, procedures, rules, and standards. Immediately report all incidents, near miss, and potential hazards to the contractor supervisor and RIFE representative. Refuse to work under unsafe conditions or perform work for which they are not adequately trained or deemed competent. Not perform any work or enter onto any RIFE site until an orientation by a RIFE Resources representative has been given. Inspect work sites, equipment, tools, and vehicles, and report any deficiencies. Be familiar with emergency response plans, equipment locations, and proper equipment use. All workers must notify the on-site RIFE representative of their presence before entering a work site. Safety responsibilities. Contractor supervisors with support from the RIFE representative are responsible to ensure the health and safety of workers and visitors on the worksite. Workers are made aware of their responsibilities. Workers are properly trained to perform their job. Compliance with government regulations, industry standards, and company requirements. Appropriate tools and safety equipment are supplied, used, and maintained. Workers are provided with and use required personal protective equipment. Workers are aware of their obligation to refuse unsafe work and that any refusal to work situation is reported and investigated. Pre-job hazard assessments are completed, permits are obtained, and that hazards and controls are discussed with all workers before work starts. Workers are in compliance with written procedures and rules. Procedures must be reviewed with workers in pre-job meetings. Emergency response procedures are established and communicated. Incidents and hazards are reported immediately, investigated, and corrected. Competency. It is a rife expectation that all workers are deemed competent through some form of assessment. Competency is important for all tasks and essential if doing a critical task or operating machinery. Alberta Occupational Health and Safety Code. Competent means adequately qualified, suitably trained, and with sufficient experience to safely perform work without supervision or with a minimal degree of supervision. Saskatchewan Occupational Health and Safety Regulations. Competent means possessing knowledge, experience, and training to perform a specific duty. Competent worker with respect to a particular task or duty includes a worker who is being trained to perform that task or carry out that duty and who is under close and competent supervision during that training. RIFE is committed to workers' rights as outlined on the slide. Enshrining workers' rights. Right to know. All employees must inform workers about potential hazards and have access to basic health and safety information on site. Right to participate in workplace health and safety. Ensuring workers are involved in health and safety discussions, including participation in health and safety committees. Right to refuse dangerous work. Workers may refuse to perform dangerous work and are protected from any form of reprisal from exercising this right. Refusal of work. You have a right, in fact an obligation, to refuse unsafe work if you believe there exists imminent danger. Report any refusal to work situation to the RIFE representative immediately. If it is an issue regarding insufficient training, a competent, adequately trained worker may be assigned to perform the task. No disciplinary action is to be taken against any worker who refuses unsafe work. Pre-job hazard assessment. A pre-job hazard assessment shall be completed at the start of each day's activities or when there are changes during the day. Safe work permits are issued by the RIFE representative before each day's jobs start. Do not start a job without a permit. We consider the completion of a permit a pre-job hazard assessment, the handshake. Contractors will be responsible for performing their own pre-job hazard assessment. In either situation, hazards will be identified, risks ranked, and hazard controls will be identified in writing. Hazards and controls will be discussed with all personnel involving the job before starting work. If conditions change from those outlined in the permit, the permit becomes invalid, and all workers must stop until a new permit is issued. If the work scope or conditions change, a new hazard assessment must be completed. Hazard assessment process. The hazard assessment process is outlined in the flowchart. It begins by identifying the hazards, risk ranking them, and generating control options. Once this is done, the best hazard controls are chosen and implemented. Note the yellow box. Once this is done, we must continue to monitor the effectiveness of our control strategy. If it is not working, notice the red box. We return to generating the control options. If it is working, no further actions are required. Hazard near miss and incident reporting. A hazard is a potential source of harm or adverse health effect on a person or persons that has the potential for loss. Traditionally, hazards come in one of the following forms: physical, chemical, ergonomic, psychological, biological, and electrical. Near miss, an event that could have resulted in contact with a hazard. This is an event that did not result in injury, illness, or damage, but had the potential to do so. Only a break in the chain of events prevented an injury, fatality, or damage. All identified hazards must be corrected immediately if possible. Ensure that identified hazards are corrected or temporary measures are taken to isolate the hazard if it cannot be corrected immediately. If a hazard or safety concern cannot be corrected immediately, inform other workers and flag, tag, or sign the hazard. Hazards or safety concerns that cannot be corrected immediately at the field level are the responsibility of the immediate supervisors, with the support of the RIFE representative, to follow through to completion. All reports of hazards and near misses are to be put in a reporting system in 24 hours. Follow-up actions must be assigned in writing on the hazard report forms and put into the ComplyWorks system. Corrective actions will be tracked to completion. Employees and contractors should be kept informed on the status of a reported hazard or concern. Hazard, near miss, and incident reporting. Incident and high potential near miss reports. A high potential near miss is an event that could have severe consequence if there was contact with the hazard. For example, could have led to significant injuries, damage, or worse consequences. Incident, an event resulting in a contact where people are affected and/or equipment or facilities are damaged. All incidents and high potential near misses, for example, fire, theft, damage, vehicle-related spill or release, business interpretation, and etc., are to lead to an immediate stand-down. After the situation is under control, all incidents, injuries, and near-miss hazards must be immediately reported to the RIFE representative, and a RIFE incident report must be completed. The following timeframes are outlined for reporting. A high risk, immediate verbal report, and a follow-up written report in 48 hours. Moderate risk, immediate verbal report, and a followed-up written report in 48 hours. Low risk, a 24-hour report and 1-week written report. All injuries must be recorded on an incident report, and if medical attention is received or there is a potential that an injury result in a WCB claim, the appropriate WCB forms must be completed. If a first aid attendant is on site, all injuries must be reported to the attendant. WCB and liability insurance. All contractors who are to perform work for RIFE Resources Limited must have a minimum of 5 million comprehensive general liability insurance and 2 million vehicle liability insurance. Contractors must also have adequate WCB coverage and have a current account in good standing. Proof of insurance must be carried with the supervisor for general liability and the vehicle operator for vehicle insurance. Rife Resources utilizes ComplyWorks to manage its approved contractors. Emergency preparedness. The corporate emergency number is 1-888-257-1873. Supervisors and contractors must be familiar with the site-specific emergency procedures and the Rife Resources Emergency Response Plan. A site-specific emergency response plan shall be identified in writing, posted where possible, and discussed with all workers in the pre-job safety meeting. The plan shall include company and external contacts, communications, muster point and evacuation, emergency personnel and equipment, directions to lease, site-specific hazards. All personnel shall shut down work and evacuate when an emergency occurs or when the emergency alarm is sounded. All workers and visitors must be familiar with the location and the use of emergency equipment on site. This includes fire extinguishers, eye wash stations, SDS first aid stations, and other emergency equipment. Emergency personnel and first aid personnel shall be provided according to Rife's ERP and legislative requirements. On-site safety, flame, smoking, ignition sources, and open flames. Smoking is only permitted in designated areas. Smoker must be greater than 20 feet from equipment or a building. Open ignition sources of any type must be kept at a distance of 25 meters from any live well or any other operating gas processing equipment. Do not leave a vehicle unattended and running within this distance. Open ignition sources, striking of matches or lighters, smoking, use of non-intrinsical safety electrical equipment, cameras, flashlights, cell phones, etc. Use of cheater cords shall not be permitted on an operating lease unless permission has been granted by the Rife representative. A flammable gas test has been completed and a hot work permit has been issued. No one will work in an area where flammable gas is above 10%. No one will work in an area where their monitor has gone off until their area has been tested and confirmed to be below the level that sets off the H2S, CO, and LELs on a monitor. Diesel vehicles must be equipped with a positive air intake shutoff if within 5 meters of process equipment or well. Vehicles are not to be operated within 8 meters of process equipment or a well without a hot work permit that notes vehicle operation. On-site safety, alcohol, and drugs. Rife goal is to provide a safe and healthy working environment that minimizes any negative effects due to impairment. Impairment has a negative effect on job performance and compromises employee safety, public safety, environmental safety, and the security of Rife operations. Any contractor, visitor, vendor, or consultant found or suspected to be in violation of the Rife alcohol and drug policy will be denied access to the job site or work assignment by Rife. Further consequences are outlined in the policy. All workers are expected to be fit for duty and in a condition to carry out their assignments and responsibilities. This also means free from any type of impairment, including fatigue. Workers who are at work or on RIFE premises after having consumed or while consuming alcohol, drugs, or unauthorized, prohibited, illegal, or controlled substances, or while impaired, are in violation of the policy. Rifle test for reasonable suspicion, post-incident, return to work, statutory requirements, and cause according to the drug and alcohol policy. Illegal drugs, the consumption, use, possession, sale, or distribution of unauthorized, prohibited, illegal, or controlled substances and/or substances-related paraphernalia while performing RIFE work or while on RIFE premises is strictly prohibited. Prescription and over-the-counter. Workers must ensure when using a licensed prescription or over-the-counter product, whether physician-approved or not, that it does not detrimentally affect performance by altering the employee's mind, mood, behavior, emotions, reasoning, performance, or physical job functions, or in any way causes impairment. Contractor supervisors and the RIFE representative must be notified of any drug, prescription, or over-the-counter product being used on site before they are used. On-site safety. Hair and hoodies must be confined or neatly trimmed where there is a danger of it becoming entangled in moving equipment. Beards, goatees, and excessive facial hair is prohibited on RIFE Resources work sites, where the use of air-breathing equipment must be required. Hoodies must have strings removed and the hood down when operating equipment or driving a vehicle of any type. Housekeeping. Work area must be kept clean and free of obstructions. Garbage must be picked up and removed from site. This includes cigarette butts in designated smoking areas. Time must be taken at the end of each workday to clean up and make the worksite accessible and hazard-free. Many of RIFE's worksites are 24-hour operations. Messy worksites may create undue hazards in the event of upset or emergency. Spills. Spills of any type or size must be immediately reported to the RIFE representative. Spilled chemicals must be cleaned up and all waste must be disposed of according to government regulations. On-site safety. Confined space entry. Review contractor and RIFE confined space requirements as outlined in the safety manual and the safe work procedures and codes of practice before proceeding with work. Must be performed according to occupational health and safety regulations. Only after a RIFE confined space entry permit has been issued and all workers have been trained in entry procedures and deemed competent. Cranes and hoists must be operated by properly trained personnel who have been deemed competent. Workers must not stand on or under suspended loads. Taglines must be used and hooks must be equipped with safety latches. Electrical operations must be only performed by qualified personnel who have been deemed competent. Electrical equipment must be properly locked out before electrical maintenance can be performed. Workers must maintain appropriate distance between power lines and their equipment. 7 meters is the safe limit of approach distance to prevent power line contact if the voltage is unknown. On-site safety. Ground disturbance. Review contractor and RIFE ground disturbance documents and the safety manual and the safe work procedures codes of practice before proceeding with work. The RIFE ground disturbance checklist must be completed prior to ground disturbance. The RIFE ground disturbance code of practice must be reviewed with workers and followed consistently. Personnel supervising Level 2 and performing the work, Level 1, must be adequately trained in their role. Crossing agreements must be in place before crossing third-party lines. Locations of all underground facilities must be identified, located and marked at the point of excavation and beyond the point of excavation. Buried pipelines must be hand-exposed or daylighted at the point of excavation and beyond the limits of excavation before mechanical excavation is permitted. If ground disturbance is carried out within 5 meters of an existing underground facility, non-destructive techniques must be used. Excavations exceeding 1.2 meters in depth be shored or properly sloped before personnel entry. Adequate access and egress must be provided in all excavations that are to be entered, at least 2 points and no more than 15 meters apart. Mechanical equipment is not permitted within 60 centimeters of energized pipelines and cables, and then only under direct supervision of a RIFE representative. Spoil piles must be at least 1 meter from the edge of the trench. Excavation in trenches must be adequately barricaded when left unattended. On-site safety. Work at heights. Review contractor and RIFE working at heights documentation in the safety manual and the safe work procedures before proceeding with work. All workers above 3 meters, 1.2 if there is a hazardous area below, are to be attached by CSA-approved and inspection fall protection equipment to an engineered time-off point. A fall protection plan is required. Scaffold or a portable work platform with guardrails is much better than work from a ladder or fall arrest. Always consider the use of platforms first. Inspect all equipment before each use for broken or damaged rungs, side rails, or missing non-slip devices. Ladders must be secured at the top or otherwise held in place of the structure that they are set against. Do not attempt to carry tools or materials when ascending or descending a ladder. Fall arrest equipment is required when potential for injury exists from a fall. Tie-off to a man bucket is not sufficient. An engineered tie-off point above the worker's waist is required. Workers are not permitted to work from the top 2 rungs of a portable ladder. On-site safety, lockout and isolation. All isolations, valves, or sources of energy must be locked out and tagged if their accidental opening and closing will create a hazard to workers. Electrical isolation and lockout must be performed for all work that could potentially send a current through the body or create a voltage potential difference between a person and another structure with the potential of discharge. All isolations shall be recorded on a RIFE isolation log. Isolations and lockout/tagging shall be in accordance with OH&S regulations and RIFE's SOPs and safe work practices. Any worker conducting maintenance or repairs must lock out equipment being worked on. The worker must retain possession of the key until work is complete and they remove the lock. On-site safety, machine guards. Guards are provided to protect workers from moving parts on machinery and must be kept in place at all times or an equivalent level of safety assured. The following guards are required: guards on tools, electrical tools, and machines, enclosed and covers on moving equipment, welding screens to prevent welding flashes from reaching workers, debris and personnel safety nets, machinery lockout systems that protect maintenance workers from exposure to electricity, heat, pressure, radiation, and etc. Local exhaust ventilation that removes toxic gases, dusts, or fumes where they are produced. Separating vehicle and pedestrian traffic. Personal protective equipment. All workers and visitors on RIFE worksites must wear, as a minimum, the following personal protective equipment as outlined in Section 5 of the RIFE Safety Manual. CSA or ANSI approved hard hats. CSA approved safety-toed footwear. Fire retardant FR outer workwear must be clean and in good condition and provided with the reflective stripes. Natural fiber or FR innerwear is required. Nylon or synthetic clothing is prohibited. CSA approved safety glasses, SED .94.3, must be worn at all times and shall be appropriate to the work being done. Face shields are required for grinding and lightning burners, goggles, or when handling chemicals that could splash. Personal protective equipment. Additionally, protective equipment appropriate for specific hazards may also be required, including but not limited to hearing protection as posted, when above 85 dBA or appropriate to the specific task or noise level. CSA approved safety harness, lanyards, and lifelines where a potential fall hazard exists. Forehead, H2S, LEL, O2, and CO personal gas detectors in all areas where hydrocarbons are stored or handled, hydrocarbon process areas, confined spaces, or where any other potential flammable or gas hazard may exist. All personnel must leave affected areas and remain there if a gas detector alarm sounds, without exception. Gloves suited to the task being performed. The proper gloves to be worn for each material handled will be specified in the product's safety data sheet. Respiratory protective equipment suitable for the hazards. Life jackets for working in, over, or around a body of water. For more details on PPE, refer to the RIFE HS Manual and the legislation for the jurisdiction. Health hazards. No person shall work in an area where oxygen drops below 19.5% or where any other toxic substance exceeds the occupational exposure limit or threshold limit value. If a portable monitor is an alarm without adequate approved personnel protective equipment. Some of the substances workers may be exposed to can be harmful to their health. Personal protective equipment specified on the SDS is required when working with controlled products including asbestos, benzene, heavy metals, H2S, pesticides, radioactive material, solvent, and acids. Refer to the SDS sheets found at facility offices for more information on the above-mentioned hazards. Refer also to the codes of practice in place for gas detection, benzene, norms, and safe handling of hydrocarbons and chemicals. Health hazards H2S. Hydrogen sulfide H2S is a naturally occurring, colorless and odorless at higher concentrations gas that can be highly toxic. In high enough concentrations, It can paralyze the breathing control center in the brain and the respiratory systems with one breath. This product is found at some of our facilities. Follow the Rife hydrogen sulfide code of practice, where H2S exposure is a possibility. All person must have H2S alive training if there is a potential to expose H2S 10 ppm. All buildings housing a potential H2S environment without fixed and externally indicating H2S monitoring must have the internal atmosphere checked prior to building entry. All workers have utilized a bump check and collaborated forehead monitor multimeter gas detectors, H2S, LEL, O2, and CO2 when H2S exposure is possible. No one shall work in an area where H2S exceeds 10 ppm, unless approved. Fresh air breathing apparatus is worn and a backup person is utilized. No person shall work in an area where a portable monitor is an alarm without adequate approved personal protective equipment and other requirements of the H2S code of practice. Avoid enclosed areas, H2S process buildings, tanks, trenches, or any other place where H2S may settle as much as possible. Treat these areas as potentially confined spaces when on a sour lease. Discipline. Employees and contractors are expected to perform their jobs safely and efficiently according to company rules, practices, and government legislation. Depending on the seriousness of the intent of the actions, disciplinary actions will be taken. This may result in being removed from site. Violence and harassment will not be tolerated on any Rife/freehold worksite. Any person not following the life-saving rules identified earlier in the presentation will be removed from site. Working alone. To work alone means to work at a worksite in circumstances where assistance is not readily available in the event of an injury, illness, or emergency. Avoid work alone situations where possible. No young or new worker is to work alone until they are deemed competent in the task they are performing. Potential hazards related to the task being performed while working alone on the worksite are to identify risk ranked and controlled. Workers required to work alone are to be provided with training, procedures, and services for routine check-in, communication equipment, emergency equipment and procedures, animal protection as required, survival training as required. There must be a process in place to routinely communicate with workers, track location and status of workers working alone, and respond to someone that can't be accounted for. Training. Contractors' employees must have WMIS 2015 training /certification as required by OH&S regulations. The supervisor and Rife representative must ensure the required number of personnel are trained in first aid /CPR. Workers in all areas that have the potential for H2S release must be certified in H2S Alive. Where applicable, other required certification may include confined space entry, transportation of dangerous goods, well control / blowout prevention, gas detection, safety management and regulatory awareness. First line, well control. First line, supervisor, well control. Fall protection. Ground disturbance, worker level 1, supervisor level 2. Specialized driver's license. Other certification as required by Rife documents or Rife representative. No young or new worker is to work alone until they are deemed competent in the task that they are performing. Thank you. You have completed the content portion of the orientation. Please proceed to the test to confirm your knowledge of what you have just learned. Once the test is completed, you have passed. Please print off the certificate and present it when you access a RIFE site. You will receive further on-site orientations at each site that you visit.